Hey everyone, welcome to Titans of Transition. I'm pleased to welcome Jay Johnson here to the show. Jay, say hello to everyone.
Hey, everybody. Joe, it's good to see you, sir. It's good to join you in this space.
Let me stop this. This is new to me, folks, so bear with me a second. Anyway, let me change the view here a little bit. See if we make it look a little better. Is that a little too goofy? That should work. Put my move my table here just a sec. Probably the other way. Okay, we're getting there. Anyway, I'm just really happy to have you on, Jay. You and I know each other from a leadership community, the Maxwell team. And actually, I remember, and I'm just going to show this one image here. This will bring back some memories to you. Here we go.
Oh,
So,
yeah, that brings back some memories for sure.
that's probably before we actually spoke, but that's when you were giving a talk at the international, what was it called? IMC, Maxwell
Maxwell
certification event. And I think some of these things were pushing 4,000 or 5,000 people at a really large Marriott near Disney in Orlando. But anyway, thought that would be nice to show, to bring that bit back in. But let me just take a minute and kind of frame things for everyone jumping in. Yeah, Jay and I met in the Maxwell community, this leadership certification organization and service organization, where many have gone to, as they transition into new careers, looking to equip themselves to teach, to coach, to develop their own businesses. And the purpose of Titans is really to dig into and drill into this whole space of how does one decide that a transition is needed, transition to a new situation in your life or to a new career or job. And I interviewed different notable leaders, different people from all walks of life, really, to try to discover, hear their stories and discover some lessons and things that would be beneficial to anyone who is anticipating a change. So I was recently at a PodFest, my first podcasting conference, also in Orlando, a month or so ago. And I was chatting with a couple people at a mixer, and they happened to be ex-military, guys who had retired from the military. And, you retire from the military, you have to educate me, maybe some others as well. But, you still have a lot of time left on the clock. People put in 20, 25 years, something like that, right, Jay? And then
Right.
they're up for retirement. And so I thought we'd talk about that a little bit. And in the context of maybe starting that up is let's tell us about your transition from the military, because you did this yourself, right?
I did, Joe. Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for having me
Sure.
again. And yeah, Joe. So I grew up in Oklahoma. Graduated high school at 17, and I had been in the grocery business for, I don't know, a good while, working for a company that I bet a lot of people have, heard or maybe even frequented, the Winn-Dixie
Oh, yeah.
grocery store, and had done that for a while. Really enjoyed it. That store was eventually bought out by a local grocer, and I became a department manager. But somewhere into that, Joe, I felt like I needed some maturing, if you will. Right, there were still things I was aware that I needed to get better at, and I enlisted in the Air Force in 1986, and at age 19, and I served 11 years as an enlisted guy, happily. Just for those of you that are listening, I loved being what I still refer to today as where the rubber meets the road kind of thing. And 11 years into that, the best leader I've ever worked for, this is probably for a future discussion maybe that you and I can have. She saw something in me I didn't see in myself, and I ended up, kind of buying into what she saw in me. And I left the Air Force in 97, just walked away 11 years in. just shy of 11 years, to be clear, a couple months shy. Walked away clean and enrolled at a university in the North Texas area and jumped into an ROTC program, Reserve Officer Training Corps program. It was there maybe 20 months, graduated with a degree, and then came back on active duty in 1999 as a commissioned officer. And I served another 11 years, a little over 11 years, and then retired in 2010. And my whole Air Force career.
Wow.
It was good.
11 years. Okay, just back that up just a second, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
Tell me again, how did you make that transition, and how did this woman kind of get your mind opened up to the possibilities of doing something different?
Yeah, that's fair, Joe. Listen, she was my commander, and I was a non-commissioned officer at the time. And look, 11 years in a small community, even that I was in as a career field, I had made a name for myself. And I don't say that boastfully. I say that I really, put my all into it. And as we do anything, if we're really invested in something, I think our efforts are rewarded. Let me say that. And so this command, she called me into her office, and basically, she said something to the effect of, Jay, I think you're playing it small, or I think there's a bigger opportunity out there for you. I want to run something by you. And she talked about this opportunity to pursue a commission, and we had a lot of dialogue around that. I didn't see myself in that light, but essentially she said, I think you would be exceptional. You can have a big effect leading others on this other side of the equation, right? Not being an enlisted guy, being a commissioned officer. And I think you can make an effect in either, just to be clear. But she was just saying you can have a broader potential opportunity here. And so she convinced me to do that. And Joe, I'm just going to be honest with the listeners. That wasn't an easy decision, because 11 years I had grown some deep roots. I was very comfortable, and that's not always a good thing, but I was very comfortable in where I was, and loved the fact that I'd created this, name for myself, and that people would call me for advice. And so to walk away from that, Joe, wasn't easy. And listen to this, Joe, and to any of the listeners, this is really the toughest thing. I was married at the time, did not have any, kids, but I was the primary breadwinner. And to make the transition, to walk away from active duty, I no longer had an ID card. I was no longer receiving a paycheck. They were not paying for college, because when I enlisted into the Air Force in '86, I had turned down the GI Bill. That's a whole nother story, and a hard lesson. But to say all of that is because, the opportunity was, you get into this program as a 30-something-year-old and you complete it, we'll guarantee to bring you back. But in between the time that I was out, it was on us to figure out how to survive, how to, earn the money to pay the bills, to be a full-time college student. And, for me as a 30-something-year-old, not get injured, not get sick, not do anything that was going to disqualify me from coming back on to active duty doing something I love.
So there's a jog to you, this whole concept. So as you said, and this is a huge theme that keeps repeating to everyone that I've heard their transition story, and that is the comfort zone being like tethers. Yeah. I mean, they're positive. I mean, it's comfort. In many cases, it's a good situation, but the idea and the notion there might be something even better, but in order to get that even better, you've got to step out and take some risks. And you just unpack some of those risks for us. So,
yeah, there's a lot of fear and unknown, and look, I was entering a program that was predominantly fielded by 19, 20, 21-year-olds. When I was 30 or 31 years of age, 30, when I left, active duty the first time, and, took a risk and bet on myself, and I didn't know what to expect, if you want the truth. But yeah, there's
Yeah.
There's a
And
lot of fear
so
attached to that.
what, people often, they do the Benjamin Franklin thing. They do the pros and the cons, and they do
Yeah.
this mental exercise. But there's often something, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there's often some situation, some voice that just pushes them over. Was there something like that that kind of had you cross that precipice? I'll call it a precipice because
Yeah.
that maybe is the way it felt. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is, Joe, and I think it's this. Cindy, my commander at the time, right back then,
Hmm.
she was ma'am to me. Um, the belief she placed in me and the admiration I had for her. Even today, she remains the best leader I've ever worked for in my life. I'm in my mid 50s. So to have her pull me aside and say, I think you have an opportunity. I see the way people respond to you. I really wish you would consider this. I know you can do it.
Mm.
I mean, that was really the precipice, if you want the truth. I remember going home, and I was married at the time, and having a conversation with my then wife and just saying, this is what the conversation was today. And I've never once considered that. And I don't know, what do you think? And so, across the coffee table, we have a little dialogue. Here's something interesting, Joe. It was still an application process. I mean, once I reached the point in my mind where I thought, okay, I'm going to give this a try, it wasn't a guarantee. So I had to build an application and staff a package, and it had to be reviewed and blessed. And they generally don't take people who are pursuing non-technical majors, number one, meaning things that are not engineering or math related, science related. And I was pursuing a non-technical major. And then, two, I was an older guy, 30 years of age, coming up on 31. And here's what's interesting. I got turned down the first time. So Cindy convinced me to give this a go. I finally thought, you know what? I have such admiration, respect for her. She sees
Mhm.
this in me, believes in me. I'm willing to try. Staffed a package. Several months go by, and it came back with a, hey, thanks for applying. No
No
thanks.
thanks.
Yeah. And so, at that point, I think, well, at least I tried. And I'm still immersed
Mm.
in, I'm still on active duty at that time, right? Because I had to be approved in order to leave active duty. I'm still immersed in my job. I'm still happy, love doing what
Mhm.
I'm doing. A little disappointed. I wouldn't,
Sure.
lie to you, but
Mhm.
she came back to me. Cindy came back to me some months later, and she said, "Did you know you're actually permitted to apply twice?" And I said, "Ma'am, I haven't."
She was not done.
Yeah, she wasn't done. I said, "I really haven't given that much consideration." And she said, "There's another board coming up, and I think you ought to knock the dust off the package, maybe clean up a few things. I think you ought to try again." And so once again, the belief she put in me, I bet on myself, and I jumped in again. And not short time after that is when it came back with, you've been approved and a discharge date, and it's
Oh
real
boy.
then, right?
Oh boy.
Everything's
Yeah.
real.
Yeah. When you were retelling that a few minutes ago, I was thinking, oh my gosh, you applied. Did you have to, were you leaving whether you got it or not? I'm glad
Oh,
they didn't do that to you.
no, they didn't do that to me. Yeah, that part was good. And the other thing, in fairness, even though there was risk, right? How was I going to navigate paying for school? How was I going to
Yeah.
take care of my family? All those things. The one guarantee on the table, literally, it was in the program that I applied through, was if you complete the program, we promise to bring you back on active duty as. So,
Oh, okay.
that was incentive. I got to go out there and do big things and good things. And if I pop out the other side, they're telling me a guarantee to bring me back.
Okay. So how long was the training or the process that you had to go through?
Yeah, it was about 20 months long, roughly. I had to go complete my junior and senior academic work at a university. I had to get accepted into a degree program. I had to maintain all the same physical fitness standards that those that were in the RTC program, 10
Mhm.
years my junior, basically. I
Mhm.
had to perform at the same level that they did, and at the minimums attached to all of those, right? And look, it was an overall good experience. And I think the value in it, Joe, was I was able to serve as a mentor to these people that were 10 years junior than me, because I had already been out there on active duty, albeit in a different kind of capacity than what they were pursuing. I had some life experience they didn't have.
Right. Yeah. So that's interesting. So you go into something like that and you think, am I going to be accepted or not?
Hmm.
And then you come out of it and yeah, you've gone through everything, the same thing. And now they're looking at you like, well, he's already been out there and been in the service 10 plus years, you know, and then you get that chance to speak into their lives and into their direction. So that's a really unique thing. Maybe that was something Cindy saw and foresaw that you could do, having already been in the special program and allowing you to go back through that commissioning process. That's fantastic. So what happened next?
So I graduate in May of '99, and some accolades coming out of school. You've always got people around you helping you be successful, right? So it wasn't just me. There were a lot of people that have been there alongside me throughout life. And so there were certainly in that program as well. But May of '99, I graduate, I earned my commission, I returned to active duty now as an older commissioned officer, second lieutenant. And for those of you that may be watching this either live or later down the road, if you have any military experience, when you're a second lieutenant, they generally don't regard you as having any knowledge. You're a sponge. You're just trying to learn. So it didn't matter that I was now 31, 32 years of age and had been in the military for a while. I kind of had to earn, all of it back. I had to demonstrate and perform, and good ride all the way around, Joe. I don't know what else to tell you, but that ended up being another 11 years. I could have gone as far as what they would allow me to do. I could have served a lot longer, but 11 years in 2010, I had my daughter at the time then was 4 years old. I'd already missed a lot of her life. And I just thought, I'm going to call this a career. But it was an easy transition back into active duty, other than, being treated as if I'm wet behind the ear and don't have anything to offer yet.
Yeah. Wow. So if you're looking back at this transition, this career transition, are there lessons from it that you can pull out for those listening who might be considering making a change? Maybe they feel like they're in a good situation, but they have an inkling that maybe they should take another path or go a different direction. So I'm just wondering if there's some nuggets you can pull out that you would share. And I know obviously you're a coach and you have a consulting business, so I'm sure you've had these conversations over and over again. So what would you offer there?
I think that's such a great question, Joe. Maybe I'll do it this way. I have a mentor in my life. I won't say that I'm as actively mentored by him today as I was at one point, but he's still in my life. And I feel like if I reached out to him, we'd pick up right where we were before. But some years ago, he had me do an exercise that was called a learning model of success. And he had me take a sheet of paper, turn it horizontal to me, and draw two perpendicular lines, one at kind of at the top of that horizontal page, and then, one down towards the bottom. And the top line, he said, I just want you to put tick marks based on your age and where you are today. You can do them in increments of 1, increments of 5, increments of 10, whatever you want to do. And so I put increments of 5, I believe. And then he said, I just want you to think about significant events that have happened in your life, all the way up to where you are now, whatever those were. And so, little things. I put a tick mark like age 6. My mother was killed in a car accident. I was with her. We were all together. We were returning from a family reunion heading into Christmas. Another tick mark. I take a job as a 9 or 10-year-old. I'm delivering newspapers. Then I signify a few things that happened in high school. And then I start working in the grocery business. And I go all the way through, my military career and where I was at the time I did this exercise with him. And he said, then on the timeline down below, I want you to kind of correlate What did you learn from these changes or significant that you called out? And this is when all this stuff jumped out to me, Joe. I would have never bet on myself like I did when Cindy encouraged me. Like I always have said to people up until I did this exercise with my mentor, Joe, I always said I'm risk averse. Like I don't want to take any big risk. I don't want to do anything that could jeopardize, my finances or jeopardize my reputation or whatever it may have been. But I did this exercise with him, and what I found that leapt off the page with me that I hadn't considered before was some of the biggest wins I've ever had in my life is when I took significant risk. It was a huge risk, to go from being a department manager in a grocery store where I was making really good money in the mid 80s, if you want the truth, and walk away from that to join the military, something I swore I would never do in life, and yet I did it. And then it was a big risk to listen to a leader who was influential in my life that I admired and respected tell me she saw something more in me and believed I could make an even greater impact if I would just consider. And so those kinds of things, that's the advice, Joe. Comfort, being in your comfort zone. I understand why, as human beings, how we get anchored there and how it serves us, right? It's important to understand it. It makes life a little easier, but the comfort zone isn't necessarily a good place to be. If we're sitting idle, if we're sitting stagnant or growing stagnant, that probably means we're not growing. And so in order to really, I think, develop as humans and to have experiences, we've got to be willing to lean in a little bit and go a little further out on that limb. And what I would encourage anyone is, if you've got a dream, a goal that's sitting inside of you, waiting to be birthed, you're the only one that can do it. And I think that's what I would say is, you can either arrive at some point late in life and go, oh, I wish I had tried X, whatever that is. Or you can lean in and bet on yourself and borrow the beliefs of others, like I did, Cindy's belief in me. And you may have, some really amazing outcomes from that.
Yeah. I mean, that comment about Cindy speaking into your life and encouraging you, that's a key tactic that can be used. You can react to it. In that case, you weren't looking for that.
That's true.
But you listened to it because there was a deep relationship and you trusted her. You had a lot of respect for her.
That's true.
So her voice went a long way. Or you can proactively look around you and say, who are those people I trust? I've got something going on inside of me and I'm not sure how to process that.
That's right.
And you can have those conversations with the people you trust, or you can engage a coach that can take you through that process. So those are definitely some things that I think are great. But this comfort zone thing, I want to camp on this just a second and just give you a couple of thoughts there. So on the comfort zone, we are wired biologically for safety and comfort, obviously. And Jay, you talked about that, but also how we approach comfort zone and change has a lot to do with our personal wiring.
Yeah.
And so let me just take a minute. There's a number of different tools that people have probably used to get a sense on their personality type. There's obviously, most people are familiar with Myers-Briggs. DISC is one that I know that Maxwell team uses and offers certification in. I'm pretty sure you use DISC. I use one called the Kolbe Index. A lot of these things will give you additional insight on how you approach things. Kolbe is a little different because it talks about how you actually expend your creative energy. So the way I'm wired in the Kolbe is as a risk taker. It's called a quick start. I don't initiate spending my creative energy through doing research. I do enough to prove my intuition and notion. This can be dangerous. And then once I'm pretty sure I'm willing to jump and go for it.
Nice.
And oh my goodness, the number of times I've changed jobs and moved states, my wife is so loving and forgiving. But because of that, I was able to make some forward progress. but without other people kind of in my team to keep an eye on me and speak into my life, who were more fact finders, more people who were more deliberate and evidence based. I had some rough spots in my career because of that. But I just want to say that sometimes if a person is wired maybe more not like me, but more deliberate, your natural inclination is you want to gather all the information you can to make sure you make a perfect decision without risk. No such decision exists, right?
That's true. 100%.
So, but it goes against the grain of a person like that. So one thing you can do is you can take smaller steps. And in a way, your application process was a small step. It wasn't like you're in, go. It was, let's do something and see a result, something smaller. And you still had you're still active duty if it didn't work out. Lots of times I advise people who think they might want to go into a different career or different industry within the same career is do informational interviews.
Oh, right?
Talk about that, because I think that's a really good tactic to do exploration.
Yeah, I love that you just said that, Joe, because, one of the things that I do today in my business, I live in the San Antonio, Texas area. There are several military installations near us. They all fall under what is now called a joint base structure. So it's called Joint Base San Antonio, and there's a couple Air Force bases and an Army post that are all under, from a support standpoint, they all fall under one commander. Support, when I'm talking about the infrastructure, that kind of thing, the basic services, those are all provided, underneath the Air Force here locally. There are some joint bases where the Army has the lead on it. I think there's one even where Navy's lead. But I say all that because I have the privilege of being a contractor leading an executive transition assistance program, called it ETAP. So these are our senior military leaders.
Military always has great names for things.
They do, yeah, they do. But these are all senior military men and women. We're talking colonels and generals and E9s on the enlisted side, chiefs, command, sergeant majors, those kinds of things. And I was just talking to a group of them about informational interviews. And I said, look, it's really risk-free. And the beauty of it is there's not the same pressure affiliated with it. So here's the way, I tend to try to tell people when you're thinking about transition. Number one, you've got to get clear about what you want to do. You got to know your giftings, know what you're good at. I love to say what gives you life, right? When you're doing it, you just feel alive, you're energized, you're happy. Get clear about those things. And then once you know what it is you want to do, go look at companies that do that. Research their values, make sure there's a values match. And then I encourage them to identify an influencer inside that company. If they can get all the way up to the CEO level, fantastic, right? CEO, COO, somebody up in that C-suite level, and request an informational interview. And a lot of times you'll be surprised, you may have to be flexible with their schedule, but they'll grant that. And maybe they're only going to give you 15 minutes. If you can get more than that, fantastic. But just go in and make it about them. Learn as much as you can about their company. I really believe, Joe, that when you're in situations like that, the law of reciprocity kicks in. You're going to be asking about them, and they're naturally going to be curious about your background. They're going to ask you some questions too. I have found, Joe, that there are times when companies hire somebody and they didn't even have an active job ad or posting out there, right?
Especially to your point.
Yeah.
If you can, the higher the organization you get, if they see the person with the right attributes, they will make a position.
That's Joe. That's what I tell. They don't want you to get away and go work for a competitor. If they can retain you, and look, there's a talent war out there, right?
Oh, man, big time.
Their companies are trying to find the very best, and it's a competitive field that's being sought after, and if they run across you and they think you're the right one and you have what they need, they will create a position. I really believe that. The key is, Joe, you hit on something. You got to find the right person to try to get an interview with. And people at the C-suite level, the senior leader level, the director, executive director levels, they've all got gatekeepers. And if you're not careful, a gatekeeper will, do the Heisman, put the arm out, hold you at bay, and you just can't get in. This is why I love platforms like LinkedIn, because you can build relationships, make connections, and hopefully something of that nature will give you that in you need to get to the right person to make it a meaningful exchange.
Right. I think there may be a sub-step or a step before that when I was indicating informational interviews. Because if you go into a C-suite type individual and you're still kind of muddled in your brain about what you're thinking,
that's right.
It isn't going to land very well. But if you have a friend or someone you trust who knows someone in an industry or knows someone in a type of career that you're curious about, and that will work because you are borrowing their relationship in a sense, or their trust.
I agree.
So if you're going to refer someone, you're borrowing that. And that's what LinkedIn was sort of built to do. It's gotten a little squirrely lately, I think. But if you really do have a connection, then I think that's a good first step. And then if you're pretty sure and you really want to be available to do a quick pivot and say yes to maybe a position, or be able to be at least well informed enough to answer a good hard question about why you want to do something, why you might want to make a move, then that's brilliant going to that next step.
There's one other aspect too, Joe. This was just weight on my spirit. I don't think I came in with any intention or even a belief that we may go there. But look, cultivating relationships is why we're here as human beings, right? We're meant to be in community. And I understand we're wired differently. You were talking about some of these assessing tools earlier, and you named Myers-Briggs and Colby, I think you called it.
Yeah.
And DISC, and I've done path elements in the past, and true colors, and there's Enneagrams and strength finders, and
there's a lot of them.
It just keeps going. And I like them all, right? I commend anyone who's trying to learn more about themselves. And I say this, I know some people are more reserved. They're not as comfortable getting out and meeting. But I'm going to encourage you to do it. The time to have a plan is before one's needed, not when it's needed. And so right now I'm trying to these senior military leaders who are, 2 years out to 6 months out from retiring, leaving something they've done probably their whole adult life up to this point, right? So it could be 20 to 30 plus years they've served, Joe. I'm trying to encourage them right now. Come join me at a Chamber of Commerce event. Come join me at a Rotary Club luncheon. Hey, come join me for this networking event. And I'm just trying to get them outside the wire, is what I would call it, the military.
Oh, yeah. Good term.
And begin to cultivate meaningful relationships out in the community, even if it's not the community that they are going to stay in when they retire. I just think getting out and meeting
exposed.
Other people, hearing what they're doing, it informs. Knowledge is power.
Yes. I do. You touched on gifting, and I really am into that as one of the key things I use in my coaching, and I've talked about it on this podcast a lot. And that is that I think that people get in, especially when they get well into their career, they get a little bit discouraged that and often that they're not moving forward or not seeing the benefits that they'd like to see or they had in mind. And they're not quite sure why. I mean, there can be a number of different reasons for that, of course, but one thing that comes up a lot is that I think people can become skilled and trained in a particular area. Maybe their parents really wanted them to be a lawyer. Maybe their parents or someone else they admired went in a certain direction and they followed them in that direction. And they got competent, they got skilled, they got rewarded for their skills. And this is my kind of story to a certain level. I went into information technology and I was really more of a change agent. I didn't come through the technical ranks per se. So it wasn't really natural, but I got good at leading change. and I got rewarded. It was a good career, but into my career, I just felt restless. And I think a lot of people have this sense of restlessness. Now, I was using what I would call my God-given gifts, but they were more secondary in my focus rather than primary. And I think that people can leave some of those gifts sort of on the table and not bring them to the fore because they don't see the value in them per se within the structure and the confines of a position they're holding, something of that nature. And I think Cindy probably looked at you and said, there's a gifting here and he's good at his job. I don't know exactly what you did, but he's good at his job. But there's some diamonds here in the rough, or there's some stuff we're leaving on the table that I think for the organizational benefit, I'd like to see him move in that direction to become all you can be, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing, and final thought, and that is, if a person feels like they're doing okay in their career, but they're exhausted all the time, that's to me a little bit of a diagnostic indicator that you're putting too much energy into something that may not come naturally to them. They can still be competent, but it's going to take more juice to get it to happen. So just some thoughts. I'd be interested in your reflection on that.
Well, you touched on a lot right there, though, Joe, that in a good way. I mean, it really resonated with me. And I think if you permit me, I'm going to share a few things here as well. First, I would tell you, Joe, I don't know if this is your experience. I'm out speaking and interacting in groups almost every day of the week, right? As a speaker, I'm out speaking at conferences and inside organizations. And it's not, qualified as a percentile what I'm about to say. It's what I feel I've heard enough at this point. I'm willing to bet about 70% of the people I meet loathe, not love, loathe what they do for a living. And when they tell me they feel unfulfilled or they don't like what they do, I generally follow that up with, well, what would you like to do? Or, what is it that's keeping you there? What is it that's holding you back from making a change? And usually I hear something like this: it's all I know. And I just can't imagine at this place in my life reinventing myself. So that really breaks my heart, if you want the truth. And it's one of the things that keeps me going out there to try to talk to, the inner being, to try to get people to touch that dream or goal that they've always had and maybe got suppressed intentionally or unintentionally, right? It could have been something a teacher said when they were a youth. Oh, Jay, you're just not very good at that. And I'm like, oh, well, I shouldn't be doing that. Yeah. Maybe I just wasn't applying myself at that time, or maybe I just hadn't spent enough time with it to let this manifest in me. So that's, Joe, that's the first thing I hate hearing.
Yeah.
It's not like this is a dress rehearsal, right? This thing called life.
Right.
And we get one go at this thing in our earthly bodies. We get one go at this.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, yeah. I want to see people live it out. I want to see people tap into who they were created to be and to use those giftings that you've touched on, because I think those giftings are intended for others, not just us.
Absolutely. And I echo that. I believe that, it's the golden rule, right? So that's the second part of the golden rule is to love our neighbor and serve our neighbors. And I think that, boy, you said a lot too. I think that this whole idea of wasting the time you have left. I hate to put it that way, but people can become so stuck. And I know this, I'm going to use this analogy. I know it's been used a lot and maybe it's not 100% true all the time, but I remember telling this to my mom and dad, who were fighting like cats and dogs towards the end stages of their lives for a period of time. I said, I just looked at them, I almost yelled at them. I said, you're wasting your time. You are fighting to win a argument, and and then I use the analogy. You're like a monkey being caught by the fruit in the coconut. Yeah. Where your fist becomes and it becomes enlarged to hold that prize, to hold what you want, that you cannot get your hand out unless you release.
That's
So
a great.
we have to release what's comfortable in order to be freed up to move towards what's better.
Isn't it interesting, Joe? I don't mean to step on you. Isn't it interesting when you talk to most people at the later stages of life, particularly when they now realize that, their time's coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their mortality is really in front of them. Most people spend a lot of time looking back reflectively. And I would say most people that I've talked to, there always seems to be regrets that are thought about, oh, if I'd only known that all the time I spent arguing was wasted time, to your point, and I would have much rather have spent that time with my loved ones. I would have much rather have taken the trip. I would have much rather have pursued my heart's desire. I would have much rather, I just think, how beautiful would it be if in those final days, we get to just reflect back with our loved ones and be thankful and grateful for the lives we touched and the things we got to experience together. To me, that will be a life well lived and fulfilled. And Joe, I think I'm trying to do some of that now. I'm trying to create some legacy. Few things fuel me more, Joe, than when someone comes to me after an event I've spoken at and they say something like, Jay, you just unlocked a door that I've been trapped behind for a very long time. Or Jay, you've changed my life. I mean, that does it for me. That's it. Anyway, I don't know, Joe. I just want that for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's the bigger reward. A lot of us are I'm retired, quote, end quote. Don't ask my wife. I'm still too busy. But I'm retired, so I'm not in it so much for the big paychecks or anything like that. But people who do this that kind of are in the same camp as us, that's the payoff. That's the payoff. It's seeing the lives change, seeing people grabbing a hold of what's possible, thinking, I love that, going outside the wire. Is that what you said?
Yeah. I gotta get
that's cool. I love that.
Yeah.
That is great. Well, listen, Jay, I want to kind of segue here just a little bit.
Sure.
And give you an opportunity to tell us about your organization and what you do at. Okay, I'm going to zoom in on you here so people can see your shirt a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Point to that shirt and tell us what it says.
Yeah, so Joe, I operate a consulting business like you, certified coach. I do a lot of training inside companies, and my passion, if you haven't seen it come out or me allude to it already, my passion is speaking. And so, my portfolio, if I was just to kind of easily consolidate it, I would probably spend 60% of my time inside companies, training, working with their executive teams or collectively their teams as a whole, helping them communicate better, develop leadership. Trust is one of my, most known for kinds of topics or curriculum that I carry into organizations. I love speaking on mindset and belief systems, but then the rest of my portfolio time, probably equally 20% coaching and 20% speaking. If I could flip it, I'd rather speak 60% of the time probably, but training and being in an organization is speaking. So my business has been in place for 8 years. I travel. In fact, I'll be in Virginia, the Hampton, Virginia area in about a week and a half speaking. And I'll be in Illinois this summer. I'll be in Oklahoma City in April. So, Joe, all those things were, do I have a moment? Can I share just one
Absolutely.
other transition?
Yes, of course.
Joe, here was one other transitional point in my life. So when I retired from active duty in 2010, I chose to stay comfortable. And this is why I'm telling people this: comfortable isn't a good place. In 2010, when I retired from active duty, the government dangled a carrot and they said, we would love to retain you as a government civil servant. And easy, right? It was going to be a Monday to Friday job, weekends off, really good pay, really good benefits. And it was something I was already familiar with. And so literally 2 weeks after I stepped out of uniform, I showed up at work in a suit and tie. in a different organization, but on the same air base that I had retired out of. 4 years into that, Joe, I just did not have any degree of satisfaction, if you want the truth. I was still serving alongside amazing men and women who I knew shared values that I had. We had a good mission. I was good at what I did, but I was so unfulfilled inside. And I would carry that home, Joe, into my home with my then wife and my daughter. And I would just kind of wall myself off from the world, sit in silence, be stuck in my head, do something mindless like turn a TV on and just sit.
Doing the time.
And at some point, Joe, I just realized my family couldn't pull me out of that. They couldn't tell me what it was I was seeking. Certainly a lot of prayerful time with my Creator was spent, but I realized it was me. I had to get clear about those things. And Joe, that's how I ended up being a coach and going after my coaching certification and desiring to pursue being a motivational speaker. But here's the deal, Joe. Listen to this. This is true. I made the decision to walk away from my government civil servant job where I was making really good money. Just walk away clean. I knew nothing about being an entrepreneur. Nothing. I had never had an entrepreneurial bone in my body until one day I did. And as I've said, I'm walking away from this with no income to replace that government civil service income. Somebody who worked for me said, Jay, you'll be back. And I remember looking at him, his name, and I said, I promise you I won't, Ed. And he said, Jay, they all come back.
They all come back. Sounds like a science fiction.
It does.
Line.
Yeah, it does.
They come
But
back.
here's the deal. You and I have probably heard this story before. It comes out of one of John Maxwell's books. I think he tells the story probably in the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. That's what my brain tells me. He talks about Cortez arriving in the New World. And his men were, disgruntled, and they longed for what they had left behind. And he basically, Cortez, it's rumored, turned to his men and he said, scuttle the ships, right? Sink them, set them ablaze. He said, because as long as we have a place to retreat, we're never going to be successful. We're never going to make it work. So they scuttled the ships. And that's kind of the way I approached that transition. When I finally decided I wanted more and I found out what that looked like for me, even though it was completely different than anything I'd ever done, I didn't leave a safe place to return. I put all of my energy and focus on building what I wanted, not what I didn't want. And Joe, it's been such an amazing ride.
Yeah. That's awesome. And again, I'm glad you shared that additional transition story. That's in itself, in addition to what you shared with us, you were way well into your career when you went through that transition. That was down the line, right? So I believe that it isn't a one and done thing. It's, I like to use sort of the mountain climbing analogy. You know what it's like when you see what you think the summit is, you come up to the top, and then you get to that flat part, and then you see another peak. You head up there and there's another flat part.
That's true.
And then sometimes you go down and up. I mean, it's a zigzaggy path, this career thing, this life thing. And just because you've made a transition, now you're trying to optimize the situation you're in. You may be in it for 6 months or 6 years and then say, I'm sensing disquiet again. It's time to do some more work. It's time to pray. It's time to seek out some trusted advisors. It's time to see what's going on.
Yeah. And Joe, here's what's interesting too. I still didn't have it figured out, right? There was still a lot of fear.
Wait, there's more.
Yeah, but wait, there was still a lot of fear and trepidation, uncertainty. I walked away from that government civil servant job, and I was probably 6 months in now to, having my own business, which was only a naming convention, if you want the truth. I didn't have a ton of clientele. I wasn't earning any money, if you want the truth. And I sit down at a conference, and there's a lady, a little younger than me, but probably close to my age, who had successfully been doing what I desire to do. She'd been doing it for a decade. And it was late in the evening as one of the conference sessions was wrapping up. And I just said, hey, before we leave tomorrow, would it be possible to get 10 minutes of your time? I just feel like you might be able to help me. I've got some questions because I don't understand, some of this. What I'm doing doesn't seem to be working. And she said, how about now? So I'm sitting talking to this lady, and here's what I said. I said, I'm new to this entrepreneurial thing. I believe what I'm entered into is what I was created to do. I just don't know from a business standpoint how to make it work. Joe, here's what she said to me. She said, if all you're going to do is hang your hat on someone else's coat rack, you're never going to be successful. And I don't know what it was in those prophetic words, but that's what really allowed me to come back home from this conference, get really clear about my brand, get really clear about who I am, get really clear about the message that I'm going to carry out to the world, and it's uniquely mine. I'm fed from a lot of streams, as I believe you are, Joe. And so I leverage all of that, all the life experience, all the wins, all the shortcomings, the challenging parts, the joyful moments when I go out to serve others, whether it's as a coach, a trainer, a speaker. They're going to get authentically me, vulnerable me, transparent me, because I want them to know that when they are willing to go deep and do the work and grab a hold of what it is that they want and to hang on to it tightly until they bring it to fruition, it can really be a beautiful ride, and one that I know they'll be thankful for in the end. But she helped me just by that comment. Quit trying to leverage someone else's name to be a success. How about you be you?
And what was that phrase again about hanging your hat?
Yeah, she said, if all you're going to do is try to hang your hat on someone else's coat rack, you're never going to be successful.
That's great. That's fantastic. Well, Jay, this has been a real pleasure. Sorry, that was my dog barking.
Yeah, it's all right. Mine's here too. I'm surprised she didn't.
It's been a real pleasure getting together with you. And I just encourage anyone who watches. Oh, my goodness.
Mailman.
You have a great day. So she has woken from her nap.
I like it.
If anyone wants to get a hold of you, Jay, your website, I will put in the comments, but you can tell us again, right? Tell us now as well. But I will also put them in the comments of this episode. Is that the best way for them to reach you?
I don't even mind sharing my cell number if you want the truth, Joe. But yeah, so my website is J2, the letter J, the number 2, servantleadership.com. Joe, I love to tell people that J2 does not stand for Jay Johnson. In the military, we use these designators, sales, if you will, of capability that people can quickly identify. So in the Air Force, human resources is A1. In the Army, human resources is S1, and the Navy has their designator as well.
Oh, okay.
In the Air Force, intelligence, like the intelligence community, is A2. In the Army, it's S2. Well, when we deploy together, like if we are in a forward location, serving alongside each other with joint service, that A or that S or N, it changes to a J, meaning it's a joint sale of capability, and then it has the number designator to tell you what that capability does. So the J2 is intended to be joint intelligent servant leadership, where you and I come together and share our wisdom and intellects. We're infinitely smarter. So J2 servant leadership, Joe, that's how people find me.
That's awesome. Well, listen, again, I really want to thank you for being on the podcast, and I look forward to any questions people drop into the stream. We can comment on them later. A little bit of a movie here for me with the live streaming, so I wasn't able to jump back there and surface those up. I apologize to anyone who had a comment, but Jay, listen, let's stay in touch. I'm looking forward to maybe a conversation down the line. So God bless you, man. Great having you on the show.
Thank you for having me, Joe. I appreciate it.